Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here, and wonderful talk by Dr. Ramani and Vasagan and all the distinguished guests. Now, I want to sort of give you a little bit of a twist to the talk Dr. Ramani presented in the context of the acceleration of technology, what has taken place in United States, and also my own personal sort of passion for innovation, because in United States and moreover all over the world, especially in universities, the professors like me and the technology experts, what is that it is very important is, how do you sort of translate your ideas? How do you sort of innovation through technology? How do you show that your ideas that you are sort of working in the concept of a research problem and a solution to it and produce a technology? So I will sort of give you three different scenarios and then sort of give you an overview, and perhaps later in my other talk I'll give you a very detailed sort of understanding of what needs to be done. So my first experience was sometime in 1996. I went to US Naval Research Laboratory, and in United States the professors are under tremendous pressure to get funding for your own research. So as usual, I went to Naval Research Laboratory and talked to the program managers and said, look, I am an expert in the area of algorithms and data structures, expert systems, sensor fusion. I'm interested in exploring some things with your Naval Research Laboratory. Now the program manager and the director then said, well, we don't fund the areas that you are working. So then I went back to the university and looked at several interesting problems they are working, so beautiful, and how the science of computing can be applied. And that's the whole idea. As being a computer scientist, what kind of computational solutions that I can provide. Now remember, these solutions must be very innovative, and in most of the agencies they would like to see an end product. They don't want to see a paper that is being published and say, here is my result. No, they're not interested in that. So I came back and I said I would like for me to get another opportunity to visit the Naval Research Lab. So the Naval Research Lab has many different levels, and there are a lot of naval officers. So they were working on one interesting problem. So the interesting problem is like detection of, I will put it very blindly, submarines underwater. I mean, in those days there was a lot of friction between United States and Russia. There were a lot of spy submarines were going underwater. So they were always very much interested in locating. So we call that as an object. So the colonel in the context of the United States Navy, he said, look, I would like you to think of an idea and see how you can detect those objects underwater. Okay? So that's a very interesting problem, but I could not understand how do I do it, because I would wanted some more information. Then he said, we have a lot of oceanographers in the Naval Research Lab, and they do collect a lot of what we call as oceanographic images. These are thermal infrared images, and these images can detect, objects underwater very carefully. So basically they said there are billions of data, so terabytes of information. So if you can come up with a very innovative idea to detect very precisely what the object is. I mean, I knew what the object later on, but they never said submarine to start with. That, it could be anything, they said. So myself and a couple of my students came back and started looking into this problem. So one thing they cautioned me is, we are not just interested in ideas or concepts. We would like to see a system or something that is working. So that is the way you have to sort of innovate, and then we'll fund you. So we thought about this problem. So let's look at it from the image processing. So you have a large set of images, and these images have a lot of redundancy. So we have to think of some very nice method of deleting all the redundancy by using some of the data mining algorithms. So then you have, and then use some of the filters, then you have a good collection of data. So with that collection of data, we were able to come up with a very innovative idea of detecting the objects. So, but the object by itself, we could not do it because, submarines, we know approximately how it sort of looks. So we created what we call as an artificial intelligence-based system, which could sort of use some of the heuristic and some of the rules to detect a particular object. So to make the story short, we developed a very beautiful system for the interpretation of oceanographic images, which in turn, the innovation or the commercialization of that is detecting submarines underwater. And so those have been used very extensively by many of the agencies that I know, because the agency was developing what is called as an image understanding system. So we were able to sort of come up with an innovation of the interpretation or the expert system interpretation of detecting the submarine. So that's very critical. So now there are two important ideas behind this. One is the kind of students that we try to have for the next generation are the students who can think. Thinking is very, very important, because how do you sort of think, how do you sort of innovate, and how do you sort of develop a system? So that's very critical. And I think all universities around the country in the United States, and I'm sure here also, I think some universities, we must be able to sort of project and put students in the context of able to develop their ideas and in the context of innovation, and then translate that into real-time technology. Now, you see there are three different images that you see. Another beautiful practical innovation that I'll tell you. So sometime during the early 90s, I was invited by a group of doctors. So they said, there is a disease called glaucoma, which is very rampant in all over the world, and it is more so in United States and other countries. So the question is, how do you come up with a device to detect these glaucoma? So this is a very biological solution, very efficiently. So I'm not a doctor and I'm a computer scientist. Again, we had to think of working with a doctor and come up with a very innovative idea of finding a chip or a device. So that I'll tell you. So then I could understand what does a glaucoma does. And so the glaucoma, as I understand, not as a doctor, but as a computer scientist, so there is a very differential pressure that creates in the human eye, in the aqueous human pressure. And that difference in the pressure would sort of distract our human way of thinking and looking at things, and that eventually as the age grows, then we all get, it looks like glaucoma. So the very interestingly, the doctors showed me, many of these eye doctors, so they said the statistics is growing enormously for younger patients. So then we looked at the problem, then I talked to some of the persons, in my mechanical engineering, School of Mechanical Engineering, some of the fluid mechanics expert. So we could understand what exactly, how the fluid flow takes place in the human eye. So we need to do some studies. Again, we had to come up with some innovative approaches. So what we did is we took rabbit as an example, and we sort of inserted a small amount of beads into the rabbit eye. And then we took, through the confocal microscope, the images of how the aqueous fluid flow takes place in the eye. So we were able to see the differential pressure and even the beads, which are very small beads. We were able to study the distraction or the continuous distraction of the fluid flow within the eye. So we could understand the physics of it. So now the next thing comes is, how do I sort of commercialize that into a very beautiful problem? So if you look on the leftmost side, you see a lot of nice distribution of fluid flow, okay, and it also how it sort of relates to some of the brain connection also. So we studied as a structure of what it relates in the context of the neural networks, and then the messages that is being transmitted into the human eye, and we could understand, and we designed a chip. Very interestingly, when we presented this chip, we got the Florida Innovation Technology Award. I mean, this is a very beautiful idea, because the reason I'm telling you is, so this is where the translation, if I had somebody told me, can you come up with a device to detect these kind of differential pressure? So when we designed those chips, in fact, some of my folks in Bangalore helped me to design the chips. So we were able to, all that you have to do, or one has to do, is insert the chip, and then all that it will do is like a contact lens. It will be able to sort of detect a differential color. Then we know that there is some sort of a glaucoma is starting. Then at that time, the particular person has to go to the doctor and sort of get some sort of medication. So what is the interesting paradigm here is translation of an idea into a real application. So that's one example. And now there are a lot more tests is going on just to see how well we can use it for human studies. Now, the next, I'm sort of giving you the example of another application, and I'm sure colonoscopy, everybody takes colonoscopy just to see whether there is any tendency for tumor. So we were able to come up with a visualization software. See, nowadays, the doctors, normally what he does is, in olden days, he has to put his hand and try to see whether there is any growth, and then look at some pictures and see whether there is any problem of the colon cancer or anything like that. Now, we've been able to sort of develop what we call as a visualization, or what we call as a virtual colonoscopy, that can be used by a doctor as well as a patient to see whether there is any tendency for any of these colon cancer development. So again, the innovation and correspondingly the commercialization. So those are the kinds of things which are very, very important. Okay. So now, recently, I was in Edinburgh workshop with some of my students. There is a program called Partnership for International Research and Education. So what is one thing which I am trying to stress in this is, the innovation is done not just by one individual or a group of individuals. It has to be with a group of different people and universities. So what is that very critical is, how do you sort of develop this kind of culture and promote this? So one last story which I want to sort of tell you is from Professor Malcolm Atkinson and from University of Edinburgh, a very, very distinguished expert. So everybody plays golf. I am sure most of you, if you have not played. So again, I'm focusing on the concept of innovation here. Now, in United States, playing golf is very interesting. But the problem is, people really have no idea of how to hold their club. Club means the bat. And target towards the destination of where to swing. I mean, everybody cannot be either Tiger Woods or Watson and so on. But an average man, how can he improve the sort of, playing golf? By having a system that we are developing, what is called as a sensor-based target tracking problem of golf. So what it does is, we embed a sensor on the golf club, and so when you swing, it is able to take, so this video, it has a sort of a picture taking device also. So it will take lots of pictures, it will collect all the data about the swinging and so on and so forth. So very interestingly, it is also sort of will project the trajectory of the ball where it is going. So by repeating his strokes and at the playing expertise, he is able to sort of being learning mode so that he can improve upon the golf. Now this is a $1 billion industry again. So we are now in the process of having a patent generated on this idea. So we don't need an expert teacher to teach how to play a golf, because this particular chip, sensor-based chip, and the whole process will essentially help us to play golf very efficiently. Now, the implication of this is this will also have a tendency how to play cricket well. I mean, there are so many academies are coming, and people are very much interested in how do you sort of bat well, bowl well, and so on. So all of these things will have. So what is that we are really interested is to provide, this kind of basic infrastructure in many of these things. So Cambridge University is also working on many other interesting problems of innovation. Because again, as I said, this has a collaboration with many other universities, including our universities in Florida. So what are the things that we need for improving on the innovation is we need to define a systems, like as Dr. Ramani has been able to define 3 well-known systems. Bosch, I knew him because I knew that even when I was a student at Indian Institute of Science, because Bosch, they used to hire a lot of students from Indian Institute of Science, especially from internal combustion engineering, to improve upon their spark plugs and so on. Now, of course, TVS everybody knows, and the Titan. So these are very good examples, but I would like to see, for example, maybe another 1 million more examples already in India. But what is that we need is to define and focus, even from the university point of view, this culture of innovation by thinking and adapting in the concept of developing the final system. So there are 2 things which are important is defining a system and looking at the applications well ahead of time. What languages are data you need to express that, how much amount of data that you need to collect, and then there are sort of what we call as a collaborative and distributed applications. One can also look at it. So the bottom line is the commercialization of our ideas in an enhanced innovation is perhaps the most successful thing that would happen in India, and it is already sort of booming in many directions. Now, one thing which we can learn from Steve Jobs in Apple, I happened to meet him, while he was visiting at Stanford. One thing what he said is, early 85s, in fact, if you read the history of Steve Jobs, he had lost his job. In fact, he was kicked out as the Apple, CEO of the company because the company did not well. But he did something very good. He did not know how to write a program, but he was able to synthesize music. There were a lot of problems how to download music, how to play music. There is the problems of privacy and all piracy and all those things. Then computing, communication, and music, he was able to integrate that on the internet, and that's where the iPhone system has come. And now if you see that, it is so beautiful and seen all over the world. I mean, you cannot even believe that, how people are interested in competing. Of course, Samsung is another major company which is also coming up with another new innovations like Galaxy and all. But so by and large, there are still many problems that we'll be able to sort of look at it and see how best we can use it. Now, one last example again on the biomedical application is, this is very important, of detecting cancer. Now, especially lung cancers, all these days, and even today perhaps, people were not looking at the time, the motion of time, because when they take images, these images were very static images, and they were able to sort of portray where the lung tumor, and then they start giving the dosages. Because when the heart, actually we breathe, the lung, the motion of the tumor also is very important. So we were able to come up with a very innovative idea of how to capture this motion in the treatment of cancer during the radiation or a chemotherapy. And now that's our idea, and in fact it's been already published and a patent is on the way, And so Siemens and other major companies are very much interested in incorporating this idea. I mean, although people never thought about it, but this is a very commonsensical problem, but the implications are enormous. So, as I said, there are students who have helped on these projects. There are collaborators who worked on these projects in national labs. So that, I think, should be our focus, is to see how do we train the next generation of scientists and engineers by the sense of innovation, and the culture of innovation should exponentially go higher and higher. So this is all I think I want to say, and I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to share a few of these examples, which sort of illustrates the innovation culture in a few of some of these projects. Thank you.